The Siberian tiger is one of the biggest subspecies of the tiger. It is widespread in our country, in the Primorsky and Khabarovsk Krai. It is also met in the territory of the Amurskaya Oblast and Jewish Autonomous Oblast. According to the results of the survey conducted in 2005, it was the most detailed survey, the tiger population is between 450 and 500. We are accumulating the scientific material and carrying out the work on tiger biology, which is aimed at developing a scientific base to save this species in our country. Although the research of its biology has been carried out for a long time, our knowledge is not thorough, and there are plenty of issues we still need to learn about, such as space structure, how far the tigers migrate, what is the influence of the tiger on its food reserve, i.e. hoofed animals. All these questions are to be researched. What are the interrelationships between tigers and other carnivores such as the brown bear, Himalayan black bear and leopard? We don't know a lot about this, and these questions also need to be researched. What is the intrapopulation variation and genetic variation? These are also questions to be studied so that we know what to do. Should we try to increase this genetic variation or observe what is happening in this population? Reproduction questions we are studying are also essential to form recommendations on how to preserve the tiger in natural conditions. We are trying to study these issues to generalize them and give recommendations on saving the tiger to control structures such as the Ministry of Natural Resources or the Federal Service for Supervision of Natural Resource Usage. We are trying to research the tiger far and wide, and when we arrived at the Ussurisk Natural Reserve, the first thing we did was to select a few tracks to figure out how the tigers move and to understand how to accumulate further material. We installed several photo traps. The initial objective was to study the location and ways to catch the tiger and tag it afterwards. Then we set up photo traps to study the location of and abundance of food reserves. There is a distinct difficulty in our work with the tiger. We don't actually work with the tigers themselves. It is rather difficult to work with them because they are difficult to spot, and it is just difficult to work with these animals. Therefore, the major method of identifying these animals is according to the excretory products tigers leave. The excrements are collected, packed and stored in special test tubes during the operational season, and later in the laboratory we analyse levels of hormonal status, the level of the reproductive hormones. This answers whether the animals leaving excrement are young or adult, pregnant or not, reproductively active or not.
Репродуктивно активные самцы или нерепродуктивно активные животные. Кроме этого, оценивается уровень так называемых стрессов.
Level of the so-called stress hormones is assessed, which enables us to understand how good the animal feels in its nature. We compare the level to that of tigers in zoos and tigers in other territories. For example, what is a more comfortable condition for living in the territory of the Ussurisk Natural Reserve, where we are currently working, or Sikoti Alin Reserve in the north? What factors are the most stressful for the tiger? Anthropogenic influence, i.e. influence of a man, density of the roads, for example, or some abiotic factors, e.g. the depth of the snow cover. All cats detest snow. Or maybe some biotic factors, e.g. prey density in the territory. Everything is studied in the laboratory. The essential task of genetic research is to know the individual animals we are working with. We may do two interesting things: to define the number of animals in the territory, and secondly, to identify the blood relations among them, i.e. which of the animals is a father, a mother, whether there are animals who are not relatives.
которые никому родственниками не являются. Конечно, нам очень важно знать, кто оставил эти
Of course, it is quite interesting to know what animal has left the excrement.
Частично мы можем, скажем так, визуально это отметить.
Partially, we can identify it visually since tigers leave trails, and we can identify the animals by the size of the trails.
Звери оставляют поскребы, это мы все тоже отмечаем в своих дневниках. Но помимо этого
Animals leave scratches, which are also recorded in our diaries. But apart from that, the most reliable method to wholly study the tigers is to catch them and put on satellite collars that will help us know where and when the tigers are located.
в дальнейшем позволяют нам знать, где, когда они находятся. При обнаружении
After
зверя
we have spotted the animal, we try to minimize disturbance because any disturbance causes stress.
стресс. Поэтому человек, который обнаружил, он отходит
The person who finds the animal steps 300 to 500 meters away to contact the immobilization group.
с группой по обездвиживанию. После сигнала о том, что зверь на таком-то участке попал в
After the signal that the animal has been caught in the loop, all the people, there can be people working on other routes, finish checking their routes and return urgently to the camp where all the equipment is fully prepared.
уже полностью подготовленное все оборудование для обработки зверя. После того, как подобрано
After the necessary dose is chosen, the immobilization gun is loaded.
по обездвижению,
We drive in a car over to the animal because the animal reacts to the car less than to the human footsteps, and also it is much safer for us.
чем машины, чем на пешего человека, но с другой стороны это и значительно более безопасно. Человек, который производит анестезию, он
The man anesthetizing the animal makes a shot and, if successful, records the time and leaves so as not to disturb the animal.
опять-таки не тревожит зверя.
The anesthetic effect depends on the weight and level of innervation of the animal,
Был возбужден, и он может уснуть.
so it can fall asleep after 2 to 3 minutes or 15 minutes, and sometimes even after half an hour.
Когда зверь уснул,
When the animal is asleep, somebody approaches him, throws a stick or tries to touch the tail with a long stick to judge the reaction.
телу зверя посмотреть и на его реакцию. Тот препарат, который мы ему вкололи,
The injection usually lasts 40 minutes to an hour.
на час. Поэтому за это время
This is the time period we have for working the animal over.
зверя. Что это означает? Один человек контролирует состояние зверя. То есть
Some of us control the condition of the animal. He moves the loop to another paw to free the paw, since the animal may have been in the loop for 2 or 5 hours, and the paw may get swollen. Therefore, one man is busy with this procedure, and he also controls the pulse and oxygen saturation of blood.
кислородом. Это вот два основных показателя,
The two factors indicate the state of the animal.
в каком состоянии зверь находится. Другой человек обязательно тут
Another man puts on the collar. The other two men take measures and collect all sorts of samplings.
измеряют зверя и собирают различные пробы,
They take measurements for us to have a full record of this animal.
чтобы мы имели полный паспорт этого зверя.
These two men take blood tests, hair to be analysed. Also, they collect ectoparasites.
Собирают эктопаразитов и, соответственно, после того, когда у нас все вот эти вот процедуры, то есть ошейник одет,
And after all the procedures are finished, the collar has been put on, blood taken, the animal measured, we weigh the animal and set up 2 photo traps to understand how the animal will recover.
Этого назовем боксером.
Давайте, правда, а?
Какая лапа.
если мы управились
If we are done with the animal within 20 to 30 minutes, we inject an antidote and leave.
антидот и уходим.
В рамках исследования тигра
In the framework of the tiger research, it was the first time that the Argos system method of satellite telemetering for terrestrial mammal research had been used in Russia.
это было запряжено с
There were some difficulties. Firstly, the Argos system had to be tested and evaluated.
надо было как бы опробировать. Во-вторых,
Secondly, the areas where our research was being conducted are in the south.
где мы собирались метить эти тигры, довольно южные. Система работает таким образом.
The work system has the following principles. The collars we put on the animals contain a GPS appliance that is programmed to spot the location of an animal 3 times a day. The device sends information to the control unit that transmits it to the satellite once a day.
Который начинает сигналить в спутник один раз в сутки. Ошейники
Our collars not only spot the animal, but also measure its activity every second.
животного каждую секунду. Также мы
We
можем
can also measure the speed the animal moves at.
мы можем знать скорость, с которой животное двигается. И если вдруг
And if the animal dies, we also know about its death.
уже не живой. Вот. У всех ошейников имеется
Every collar is equipped with a self-stretching lock that is pre-programmed to let the collar fall off.
заранее запрограммировать его, и чтобы ошейник сбросился. Это очень важно, например, когда
It is very important when we collar young animals. The animals grow, the neck perimeter changes, and the animals may suffocate if the collar is not off.
может задохнуться, если ошейник не сброшен. В ходе нашего проекта я
Project, I am responsible for immobilizing the animal to be able to work with it, to collar it. One point should be considered. We work with wild, dangerous animals, tigers and bears, and my task is not only to harmlessly immobilize the animal, but also to do it in such a way that the procedure is safe for our staff.
для работы с ним окружающего персонала, то есть нашего отряда. Чтобы обездвижить
To immobilize the animal, we shoot it with a special gun. We use medications that drug the animal for 30, 40, 50 minutes.
позволяют усыпить животное на 30, 40, 50 минут. Вот. Здесь возникают определенные
We
проблемы.
face some problems here because primary medications such as Medin that unnerve muscles and make it safe for us to work affect the animal's respiratory activity.
Потому что угнетается дыхательная деятельность у животного. Вот. Поэтому в ходе анестезии
So while the animal is anesthetized, we have to monitor its condition, its breathing.
хорошо оно дышит. Вот. Для этого используется специальное
There
оборудование.
is special equipment for this purpose, for example, a pulse oximeter that is attached to the tongue to control oxygen saturation of blood and pulse frequency. Besides, nothing can substitute human control of the animal's breathing and heartbeat frequency.
У зверя. Дальше начинается уже сбор образцов.
After that, collection of samples starts. Blood sampling to clinically analyze blood and hormones. The clinical analysis of blood enables us to detect latent diseases in the animal. The process of inflammation in the organism.
Например, процесс воспаления в организме у животного. Кроме этого, у самцов
We also take sperm sampling from male tigers to estimate reproductive qualities.
ошейники, конечно,
The collars enable us to locate the animal on a daily basis. but in the territory of the Ussurisk Natural Reserve, the number of animals is larger than we have tagged.
Больше животных, чем мы пометили. Их перемещение
Their migration and individual identification is possible due to the method of the photo trap, photo identification. This method is very simple. The photo cameras are installed throughout the Ussurisk Natural Reserve. They react to movements, and when the animal passes by, a picture is taken.
производится снимок. Фотоловушки установлены таким образом, что
Cameras are installed in such a way that we can receive photos from both sides. This is necessary because the pattern of the animal skin is unique, and this pattern is on both sides of an animal.
по бокам зверя. Таким образом, мы сравнивая с помощью компьютера
Comparison of patterns taken by different cameras makes it possible for us to find out the number of animals, their migration paths, and even receive information of their daily activity. That is, the time of day when a certain animal is active.
очень интересные данные о суточной активности, то есть в какое время суток тот или иной зверь активен.
All this information is validated from data received via the satellite collars.
от спутниковых ошейников. Вся информация,
All the data collected by collars, photo traps and laboratory research are recorded in a single database which helps us analyze all the information.
единственную базу данных, которая позволяет потом анализировать так или иначе эту информацию.
Первый след, который мы нашли в уссурийском
The
заповеднике.
first track we found in the Ussurisk Natural Reserve belonged to the animals whose heel was 10.5 wide up to 11 centimeters. And we were glad that it was walking quite close to our cordon.
В близком расстоянии ходит от нашего кордона.
Профессором его назвали.
We called it Professor since it was very smart and quick-witted.
Для того, чтобы
To
отловить
capture the animal, we set up loops in the main paths where tigers move.
в основных местах передвижения тигров на дороге. Так вот это
This professor was walking on our loops, and when it came up to them, it examined and knocked them down with its paw, just walking and knocking them down in the most impudent
идет и
way.
подбивает самым наглым образом.
After we identified it with our photo traps, we named it Professor. This animal is one of the most interesting to my mind.
Одна из самых интересных, на мой взгляд.
Its home territory is quite large, therefore it is very interesting to catch it. We have a route that is 8 kilometers long. 12 loops were set up over there, and it went all the way through the route, 8 kilometers, came up to each loop, walked around it.
Весь этот маршрут 8 километров подходит к каждой петле, обходит ее.
In the next season it was looped twice, but each time managed to pull out its paw.
В следующем сезоне он у нас дважды бывал.